On October 23, 2025, in Ryazan, Russia, the sky became witness to a terrific strike by the Ukrainian forces. A Ukrainian drone strike had just hit one of Moscow's most critical oil refineries. This wasn't just another spot on the map, but a facility that supports not just civilian life, but the Russian war machine itself. Within hours, reports confirmed another explosion in Belgorod Oblast, this time at an ammunition depot near Valuyki. Ukraine's general staff described the twin attacks as part of a broader effort to weaken Russia's military infrastructure, targeting the supply lines, fuel reserves, and storage hubs that keep its invasion running. The Ryazan refinery, owned by Rosneft, processes more than 17 million tons of oil annually. Losing even part of that capacity isn't just an economic blow, it's a tactical setback. Each fire, each explosion, chips away at Russia's ability to sustain its war effort and stretches its logistics thinner by the day. For Ukraine, the focus has shifted from defending itself to disabling its ability to attack, from repelling attacks to striking the very backbone of Russia's military capability. Let me walk you through what made this strike so important and how it's reshaping the balance behind enemy lines. At 2:37 a.m., the air above Ryazan was still. The night carried that strange calm that only military towns know, a hum beneath the silence, the quiet rhythm of machines waiting to wake. The airbase on the outskirts of the city, which is home to refueling aircraft, bombers, and maintenance crews, was half asleep. A few guards made rounds along the perimeter fences, boots crunching on frost, cigarettes glowing faintly in the dark. No one expected the sky to turn hostile. Hours earlier, nearly 600 kilometers away, Ukrainian operators sat before flickering screens deep inside a reinforced control center. The mission was simple in theory, but daring in scope: to hit Ryazan, one of Russia's most guarded military zones. It wasn't about destruction alone, it was about reach. Kyiv wanted to prove that distance no longer meant safety. Every kilometer closer to Moscow raised the stakes. This was no longer just a tactical mission, it was psychological warfare, challenging the myth of Russia's deep, impenetrable interior. At 1:55 a.m., the first drones were rolled out onto an unmarked field somewhere in central Ukraine. These weren't small reconnaissance drones. They were long-range models, re-engineered airframes stripped to the essentials, built for endurance rather than maneuverability. Each carried an explosive payload equivalent to a small artillery shell, guided by GPS and pre-programmed coordinates. By 2:10 a.m., the first drone lifted off, then another, then another. They rose one after another, climbing steadily until they vanished into the clouds. Ground operators watched their blips crawl across radar screens. The drones flew low to avoid Russian radar, hugging the terrain and navigating using stored satellite data. Each was part of a formation designed to confuse air defenses. At 2:30 a.m., radar systems near Lipetsk picked up faint echoes, dismissed at first as atmospheric clutter. Russia's network was vast but overstretched, scanning constantly for missiles, rockets, or bombers. Small drones barely registered as threats until they didn't. Inside the Ryazan command post, officers were drinking coffee and updating flight schedules for the morning refueling runs. A few aircraft crews were sleeping in nearby quarters, and others were prepping ground vehicles. When the first alert came through, no one moved with urgency. The warning seemed routine: unidentified aerial objects approaching from the southwest. False alarms were frequent. By 2:41 a.m., the first explosion changed that. It wasn't large, more a burst of light than a blast, but it tore through the edge of a fuel depot near the tarmac. A guard shack was torn apart, alarms ringing across the base. Within seconds, sirens cut through the stillness, and the once calm night erupted into motion. Soldiers scrambled to defensive positions. Anti-air guns swiveled toward the horizon. At 2:44 a.m., the second drone struck. This time it hit the wing of a parked Il-78 refueling aircraft, one of Russia's most valuable assets. The fireball lit the runway like daylight, and a wave of heat swept across the base. Witnesses later described it as a sunrise that came too early. The explosion shattered windows 2 blocks away and sent maintenance crews running for cover. From their command stations hundreds of kilometers away, Ukrainian operators watched the infrared feed. The first objective was complete, but the mission wasn't over. 5 more drones were still inbound. At 2:47 a.m., Russian searchlights crisscrossed the sky. The roar of engines from scramble teams echoed across the airfield. A pair of Panzer S-1 defense systems came online, their rotating cannons scanning for the incoming swarm. The operators had seconds to react. 2 drones were intercepted almost immediately, blown apart mid-air. The explosions showered debris across nearby storage units, igniting small fires. But the interception came too late for the others. At 2:50 a.m., the 3rd and 4th drones slammed into the maintenance hangars on the northern end of the base. The structures collapsed in partial ruins, sending up columns of smoke visible across the city. Residents woke to the sound of explosions, their windows rattling, phones lighting up with emergency alerts. Videos later uploaded to Russian Telegram channels captured the orange glow pulsing behind the tree line. Inside the base, chaos took hold. Commanders shouted orders through radios drowned in static. Fuel lines hissed and popped under pressure. Fire crews rushed out in heavy suits, their vehicles maneuvering through burning wreckage. One serviceman described the moment as trying to fight a storm with a cup of water. At 2:55 a.m., another drone was spotted approaching, low and fast. The Panzer opened fire, tracers ripping across the night sky. For a few seconds, it looked like a successful intercept. Then the drone's fragmented remains tumbled forward and exploded near the radar station, taking out communications for the eastern sector. Ukrainian operators marked the hit in real time. A communications blackout meant any coordinated defense would falter. The mission was already a success strategically. The rest was endurance. By 3:05 a.m., local air defense units from Ryazan's outskirts joined the fight. Missiles streaked upward, their bright trails curving against the stars. Some found their marks, others didn't. The remaining drones weaved unpredictably, guided by pre-programmed maneuvers that mimicked evasion. At 3:10 a.m., one of the final drones made it past the defensive grid. It struck near a weapons storage area adjacent to the runway. The detonation was massive, sending shockwaves that registered on seismographs across the region. Debris rained down for nearly a minute. That was the blow that crippled the base's operations for the rest of the night. For the next 20 minutes, fires raged uncontrollably. Black smoke rose high enough to be seen from the city center. Civilian emergency units were ordered to stay clear until the area was declared secure. The entire district around the base went into lockdown. By 3:45 a.m., all Ukrainian drones had either hit their targets or been shot down. The mission's operational phase was complete. What followed was a long, frantic effort to contain the damage. Firefighters battled flames that fed on aviation fuel, ammunition, and wrecked machinery. Medical teams pulled out injured personnel. At 4:20 a.m., the first official statements began circulating on Russian channels, calling the event an attempted attack by enemy UAVs, partially repelled. The tone was familiar, minimizing losses. But satellite images taken hours later told another story. At least 2 large aircraft were wrecked, 1 hangar flattened, and multiple fuel storage tanks were scorched. In Kiev, the news reached headquarters before dawn. Analysts watched satellite confirmation roll in, each image validating the risk they'd taken. The Ryazan strike wasn't meant to change the course of the war overnight. It was designed to send a message. That message was clear. No distance within Russia was untouchable anymore. By sunrise, the smoke was still there. Ryazan's residents recorded the aftermath from balconies and highways. The videos showed columns of gray rising against the pale sky. Convoys of emergency vehicles lined up for kilometers. The official death toll was listed as 3, though witnesses claimed the number was higher. At 6 a.m., the fires were finally contained. Crews dragged charred wrecks off the runway. What remained was a scarred stretch of asphalt, warped and blackened, littered with twisted metal and melted glass. The smell of burned jet fuel carried across the wind. Soldiers moved quietly among the wreckage, gathering fragments of the drone fuselage for inspection. Inside the Kremlin, the response was immediate and defensive. Officials condemned the terrorist strike and vowed retaliation. Yet privately, reports circulated acknowledging the breach in air defense coverage. For a state that prided itself on layered protection, Ryazan was a blow, not of scale, but of symbolism. By mid-morning, Ukrainian media outlets were already celebrating the operation. Analysts dissected footage, highlighting the precision of the drones and the psychological impact. The distance from Ukrainian territory to Ryazan became a point of pride. It was proof of evolving range, technology, and intelligence coordination. Meanwhile, on social channels, Russians debated what the attack meant. Some dismissed it as propaganda. Others questioned how drones could cross hundreds of kilometers undetected. In a country where air raid sirens had rarely sounded that deep inland, the shock was palpable. By noon, investigative reports began tracing the origins of the drones. They were believed to be converted Soviet-era aircraft, modified with composite shells and longer-range engines. Ukrainian engineers had stripped them down to their lightest form, replacing unnecessary weight with fuel capacity. The strategy mirrored earlier attacks on Pskov and Engels air bases, but went farther, both literally and strategically. What set the Ryazan strike apart was not just the hit itself, but the precision of its timing. Analysts later discovered that the attack coincided with the rotation schedule of bomber units returning from southern sorties. Had the drones arrived 30 minutes later, the damage could have doubled. The operation was timed to catch the base at its most vulnerable, between patrols, between shifts, between assumptions of safety. By 1:30 p.m., the story dominated global headlines. Western intelligence sources quietly confirmed the strike's authenticity, while Kiev maintained deliberate ambiguity, neither claiming nor denying responsibility. In warfare, silence can speak louder than admission. In the following hours, cleanup crews worked to restore minimal operations at the base. Runways were patched, fires extinguished, and debris cleared, but the psychological crater remained. Satellite photos captured the blackened outlines of destroyed hangars, like ink stains on concrete. By evening, officials in Moscow convened a special meeting to reassess drone defense protocols. The attack had exposed blind spots across central Russia and areas once thought unreachable. The word Ryazan began circulating in defense circles as a shorthand for vulnerability. Behind closed doors, military analysts admitted something quietly revolutionary. The age of drones had redefined what safe distance even meant in 21st century warfare. For Ukraine, the success of the strike carried layered significance. It was tactical proof that long-range drone warfare could bypass conventional defenses. It was a strategic reassurance to allies that innovation could offset disparity in resources. And it was emotional, a demonstration that even deep behind enemy lines, Kiev's reach remained steady. In Ryazan, life tried to return to routine by nightfall. Streets reopened, residents swept away debris, and the airbase resumed partial activity. But every sound, whether it be a passing aircraft or a low rumble, made people glance toward the horizon. As night fell once again, Ukrainian operators reviewed the mission logs. The footage showed the final moments of each drone, their steady approach, the flare of impact, and the silent fade to static. One of them reportedly said, "They will rebuild, but they will never sleep the same again." The Ryazan strike wasn't the biggest or deadliest attack of the war, but it rewrote the geography of fear. It reminded both sides that modern warfare is no longer about front lines alone. It's about patience, precision, and the reach of a signal that travels farther than any bullet. If you found this breakdown insightful and want more deep dive analyses into how modern warfare is changing around the world, subscribe to upcoming reports. Every battle tells a story, and we will always be here to tell it.